Welcome back to the deep dive. Today it's Veterans Day, and in honor of that, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to take a deep dive into the life of a Roman soldier
Okay.
during the late Republic, and specifically those who served under Pompey the Great. You've sent over some really interesting stuff, historical texts, military records, even some personal
Yeah.
accounts.
I mean, it's really fascinating to get to look at these kinds of primary sources from the period. I think they're going to give us a really good view of what it was like to actually be a part of this legendary fighting force.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting is like we always think of these big battles, these big names, Pompey the Great,
Mm.
Caesar, but this is really a chance to look at, the average soldier and what their life was like and really the human side of this history. So ready to step back in time.
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay, so imagine yourself as a new recruit in Pompey's army. You're probably not getting a signing bonus,
Right.
but you are being promised glory
Yeah.
and maybe some land down the line.
Yeah, that land was a huge incentive. I mean, for many soldiers from more humble backgrounds, it represented a future for them, a stake in, this vast and growing Roman Empire. But first, of course, they had to survive the training.
And this training was notoriously grueling. One of the sources you sent mentions soldiers marching 20 miles every single day, carrying 60-pound packs. I mean, I complain when I have to walk to the fridge.
Yeah, and it wasn't just marching either. Their training swords, just to give you an example, were actually heavier than the real ones.
Oh, wow.
This intense physical conditioning that they put them through wasn't just about building muscle or, even teaching them, basic swordsmanship. It was really about forging this iron discipline.
Yeah.
The resilience, the absolute obedience that really came to define, the Roman legions. Every movement, every swing of their gladius, that's their short sword, was honed to lethal perfection.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see how much emphasis they placed on this group cohesion as well. You pointed out these formations. They drilled relentlessly maniples and cohorts, these small, adaptable units that could switch from offense to defense in an instant. And this was really key to their success, wasn't it?
It really was. I mean, that
Yeah.
flexibility allowed them to conquer these diverse terrains,
Yeah.
from scorching deserts to dense forests to, really any type of environment that they were in.
Yeah, and I know Pompey himself was incredibly hands-on when it came to the training.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He understood that adaptability was key for his soldiers. His legions were constantly on the move. They were facing, like I said, diverse enemies. They were facing challenging landscapes, and they really had to be ready for anything.
And I know we've talked about prepping their bodies and their weapons for battle, but they were also appealing to a higher power. Um, the sources you shared really highlight how deeply intertwined religion and warfare were in Roman life. It's fascinating.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Roman army was a spiritual force as much as it was a military one. I mean, they truly believed that their victories, their survival, depended on the favor of the gods.
So you'd have these elaborate rituals before a major battle, like the sacrificium. They would offer up animals, oxen, sheep, even pigs, to gods like Jupiter, the king of the gods,
Mm.
and Mars, the god of war.
Right.
And they would actually examine the animal's entrails for signs, for messages from the gods. Can you imagine the pressure?
Yeah, I mean, today we kind of, laugh about this idea, but for them, this was serious business. They also relied heavily on these specialized priests called augurs who could, interpret signs and omens.
Uh-huh.
If the omens were favorable, they believed that, would boost the morale of the troops. But if they were unfavorable, they might actually postpone a battle,
Oh, wow.
even if all other signs pointed to attack.
Yeah. And of course, we can't forget about the sacred chickens. You mentioned this earlier. How eagerly a chicken pecked at its feet could determine the outcome of a battle.
It's true. I mean, it seems strange to us now, but for the Romans, these rituals, these omens, were a direct link to the divine. And, it really is a window into their worldview. They believed that the gods actively influenced human affairs, especially war.
And it wasn't just before a battle.
Right.
They would maintain these religious observances even on campaigns.
Yeah, it was really important. Yeah, they really reinforced that connection to the divine. And I think that's a really important point to bring up. I mean, imagine you're a soldier, you're far from home, you're facing danger, disease, uncertainty. That connection to the gods, those rituals, they must have been a huge source of comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of comfort, or lack thereof, let's talk about the less glamorous side of being a Roman soldier. The pay, the food, those living conditions.
Yeah, let's just say it wasn't exactly a life of luxury.
No, the base pay was pretty modest, considering all the risks they were taking.
Right.
But hey, there's always that chance of getting your hands on some loot.
Right. I mean, that was definitely part of the appeal. And generals like Pompey, they knew that sharing the spoils of war was a great way to keep those soldiers loyal.
Absolutely. But even with the promise of riches, daily life was no walk in the park, right?
Definitely not.
Sharing a cramped tent with 8 other guys,
Yeah.
constantly on the move, building makeshift camps, digging trenches, battling the elements, sounds exhausting.
It was definitely a demanding existence, required incredible physical and mental stamina.
And then you've got the constant threats of disease, adapting to unfamiliar cultures and environments.
Right. These guys were far from home. I mean, really think about that. They were ripped from everything familiar, thrown into a world of constant danger and uncertainty.
Yeah. It really makes you appreciate the incredible structure and organization that made this army so effective.
Absolutely. The Roman army was a well-oiled machine,
Yeah.
a hierarchy designed for, maximum efficiency and discipline. And that structure was really, I think, one of the keys to their success.
So you have the legionaries, the everyday soldiers. They're organized into these centuries, each one led by a centurion.
Right.
And I'm picturing these centurions as like the ultimate drill sergeants,
Yeah.
battle-hardened and ready for anything.
That's a pretty accurate picture. They were responsible for training, for discipline, for leading their men into the heart of battle. These were positions earned through merit, through bravery, years of experience. So a very tough, but a very highly respected role.
Yeah. And of course, at the very top, you have the general, the man calling the shots.
Hmm.
In this case, Pompey the Great.
Right. Pompey's military genius is well documented, but, he was more than just a brilliant strategist.
Yeah.
He cared about his soldiers. He listened to their concerns. He understood their needs. And crucially, he rewarded their sacrifices. And this earned him, a deep and abiding loyalty from his troops, which was really crucial, especially during those kind of volatile, turbulent times in the late Republic.
Okay, so we've talked about all this. They've gone through this grueling training. They're facing all these dangers. Maybe they've gotten their hands on some loot.
Right.
What do they have to look forward to? Was it all worth it in the end?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The Roman Republic had this, somewhat complicated relationship with its veterans. You see, that promise of land.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't always a guarantee. And when you've risked your life for years, coming home empty-handed could lead to some serious discontent.
Yeah, and unrest.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
you can imagine soldiers feeling betrayed by the very system they were risking their lives to protect.
Absolutely. So Pompey, how did he navigate this? What did he do to actually address these very real concerns
Yeah.
and, make sure that the people who had served under him were taken care of?
Well, he went above and beyond what most commanders were willing to do. And we'll dive into Pompey's, kind of unique approach to veteran care after a quick break. Welcome back. As we continue this deep dive, exploring the lives of those who served under Pompey, it's important to remember that these weren't just names on a roster. These were individuals with families, with hopes and dreams, with aspirations, with fears, just like the veterans that we honor today.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in, these grand narratives of history, and you forget about the human cost. And the sources that you shared really bring that human element to life.
Right. We've talked about the physical challenges, but what about the psychological impact? I mean, these campaigns, they could last for years, far from home in completely alien environments. Imagine the toll that must have taken.
It's hard to even fathom. These soldiers were ripped from everything familiar, thrown into this world of constant danger and uncertainty. To face those odds, those hardships for years on end. I can see why Pompey's concern for his troops was so crucial.
It wasn't just about keeping them alive. It was about maintaining morale, fostering loyalty. And that really starts with, understanding their needs and their motivations.
So what kept these soldiers going? What made them endure these years of hardship and sacrifice? I'm guessing it wasn't just the modest pay.
Of course not. One factor was definitely the intense camaraderie that developed within the legions. These men trained together, they fought together, they lived together, they relied on each other for survival. And in doing so, they forged bonds that really transcended rank and background.
It's that band of brothers mentality, right? Facing unimaginable odds side by side with your comrades, with your friends.
Exactly. And that shared experience, that trust that was forged in the crucible of war, it created this really powerful bond that helped them endure hardship and overcome fear.
There's also the discipline. The structure that the army provided. I mean, the Roman military machine with its clear hierarchy, its rules, its rituals, and, it must have offered a sense of order and purpose in a world that could often feel chaotic and unpredictable.
That's a great point. You know, that strict discipline, while it was harsh, it instilled a sense of security. Everyone knew their place, their role, their duty. And contributing to something larger than themselves, to the glory of Rome itself, must have been incredibly motivating.
And let's not forget the potential rewards. The promise of land, the allure of spoils from conquered territories,
Right.
the chance to rise through the ranks. I mean, for many, the army was a path to a better life.
Absolutely. Especially under a general like Pompey, who was known for rewarding his troops generously. That hope for a better future definitely made those sacrifices feel worthwhile.
So we've talked about the motivations, the challenges, this organizational structure that made this army so formidable. But what about the man at the helm? What made Pompey such an effective leader, someone capable of inspiring this kind of loyalty?
Well, Pompey was, without a doubt, a brilliant strategist and tactician. But I think what truly set him apart was his ability to connect with his soldiers. He wasn't just this, distant figure barking orders. He was involved, he listened, he recognized their sacrifices, and crucially, he rewarded them.
It's that genuine concern for their well-being that you highlighted earlier.
Exactly. He understood that leading an army was about more than just strategy and tactics. It was about cultivating trust, inspiring loyalty. He knew that a well-led army was a loyal army. And in the volatile world of the late Republic, that loyalty was paramount.
And a key aspect of that loyalty, as we discussed earlier, revolved around this ever-present issue in Roman society.